Captain Shaw of the Barbados Militia is the factor on Lord Coke's sugar plantation. Bajan by birth, he comes from Scottish stock 3 generations back. Shaw, during the course of the book, is writing his memoirs, and this is an extract.
I am a blend of bloods. My mother was of Norman descendancy. She was never much of a churchgoer, but solemn and righteous. My father used to joke that she needed no kirk, as she was her own bishop and priest and congregation. In my father's company, I mirthed and played more than was good for me, but with her I remained stony of expression and conduct, which earned me some compliments from her. My father took to drinking his own bush rum, which caused as much disharmony between he and my mother as did his taking of a mistress, Nancy. It occurs to me now that my mother was relieved to be rid of his rude attentions. Oh, and what a great, black, buxom blunderbuss of a woman was Nancy. Favored, I'll grant, in the light of her eye and the whoop of her laugh and the shape of her ear and paps even at nigh on 40. Before I learned of her unholy partnership with my father, I had fared adored the bosom. She turned a dreary house into a carnival, and she jaked and jested with me. Around this time, my father had taken to addressing me in the Scotch style and using other words of that land, 2 generations removed from him. About the same time as he had taken up with Nancy. It was part of his deterioration under the black whore. He dreamed of guddling trouts in broad rivers and traipsing through gloaming with lassies. There's no fool like an old fool, as my mother used to say. And he wasted his talents on rum and injudicious talk and riding his Nancy like she were a thoroughbred mare. He had a son of her. In one stroke, he mixed blood that should not be mixed. He made an open harlot of poor Nancy and a rejected woman of my mother, and he cheated me of my ancestral rights. Had he sold a child to a neighbor's plantation in the antique and accepted style, my mother and I would not have suffered as we did. She, for her own part, had the gumption to drop dead. She did it one morning with her usual competence and lack of fuss, dressed in her Sunday best, right in the room where her body would be laid out.
In 1831, Barbados fell victim to a terrible hurricane. It's the worst in its history. Elspeth and her new lover, George Lyle, are caught in the midst of it.
She awoke to the shaking of the stone around her, opened her eyes to see a turret of the great mansion drop outside her window, crumbling like a sugar column. It exploded somewhere unseen below. A moment later, a grey, dense cloud rising in its wake. George jumped up with a shout, stared in amazement first at the night outside, the gale howling, timbers groaning, and then at her. The floor beneath them rose up as if a beast below were breaking the surface of the sea. He cried, "Jesus!" And Elspeth flinched at the blasphemy, cursed herself for their many sins that had brought hell's hand from out of the depths. George took hold of her and marched her, the two of them near naked, through the bedroom door, down the shuddering stairs, out into the fury of the night. He drove her on through the gardens. Rain like she had never seen before spewed from the sky, long freezing spears hurled by some demented spirit. The noise of the wind, stone cracking, wood buckling, the mad activity. By the time they had put a little distance between themselves and the house, half of it had been torn away, brick and plaster dissolving in floodwaters. They waded through slough and mud where the garden had been only hours before. George shouted angrily at her, "Get a move on!" as if the storm were of her making, a trap to lead him to his death. She saw where George was leading her, and she tried to pull back. He hauled her towards Henry's feeble chapel house. If the bulk and strength of the great stone mansion had not been enough to protect them, what chance would they have in the flimsy little hut of the gardener? George yelled, "Wood bends with the wind, it doesn't collapse." They were surrounded by massive trees blown over like skittles. roots had torn up the earth, waving gutlessly in the air over the deep wounds they had made in the gardens. Henry opened his door and ran towards them, lumbering through water and wreckage. The gardener wore no shirt, and his breeches had been torn and rolled up at the calf, just like her image of him as Frankenstein's creature, the brutal embodiment of the storm itself. She reviled his blackness, wished hopelessly for the calming wisdom of a Lord Coke, an Overton, a superior white man from a steadfast castle, an elder who would know how to deal with nature's stupid temper.
As she wanders through the highways and byways of Barbados, Elspeth recites lines of poetry and speeches from plays to herself, and she half overhears snippets of conversations from passers-by and fellow travellers.
Higher monkey climb, the moshi show tail.
Heart of the north, that mouldering long hast hung on the witch elm that shades St. Fillan's spring.
If you slip by Nesfield and Boscobel, turn round by Fustic and Little Good Harbour, up to Salmon, on to Cocoa Point.
Is that no what the hail jing bangs for? Getting a key-cut lassie's skirts for a peep at their coggies? Settle yourself, woman. It's no the end of the world.
They say he had 2 wives, one white as fog, one brown as molasses rum.
Our dearest families, a year has passed and still we have not heard from you. How slow is communication between our world and yours. Write to remind us you have not forgotten us.
Did you hear the coming of the rain child? Bathsheba they call her. Keep her watch, they say, on little Scotland.
Lord Lisle attributes his family's tragedy to a strumpet. I use the wording I was given, mistress.
And Twiggy Oxford, I gae doon, John Anderson, my Joe.
Be not afeard, the isle is full of noises.
Sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not.
The clouds would open and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again.
We ain't quite north, and we ain't quite south. When you ain't got horse, you must ride cow.
Yours, Diana Moore, on behalf of Sarah and Mary Alexander, Mary and Margaret Lloyd, Jean and Mary Malcolm, Bessie Ridder,
Susan Miller, Moira Campbell, Mary Fairweather, Rhoda Douglas, Mary Miller,
Eliza Morton, Mary Rick, and Mary Murray, Martha Glover,
Jean McNeil, Jean Holmes, Moira Campbell, Elizabeth Johnston, Martha Turner.
Small garden got bitter weed.
150 years later, Elspeth's farewell to Greenock was finally written by Dave White.
As part of the fault of their forefathers who chose race over class, they won't make that mistake again. How easy it is to lose an identity, how hard to forge a new one. If the Redlegs, as an ethnic